What jobs are a lot harder than most people think? Story 1. Aged care. Terrible pay, always understaffed, always stressed, always physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausted. Looking after people's parents their kids have long since abandoned. Answer. People's parents their kids have long since abandoned. Let's not stigmatize the younger generation. Some parents burn their bridges. Others are so oppositional with their nearest relations that professional care services are the less bad option. In still other instances, the level of care a parent needs is beyond the younger generation's ability to provide. I write this as someone who provided end-of-life care to a parent. There was a point where his primary care physician told me, not asked, that Dad had to go into a nursing home. They were afraid I'd give myself a hernia raising him from a sofa, even with equipment to assist the lift. Story 2. Work with kids. Doesn't matter what age. Those people get not enough credit. Also cleaning. Darn, I wouldn't do this for $1 million a year. Story 3. Customer service. People don't realize how emotionally draining it is to stay polite while being yelled at or blamed for things out of your control. Answer. I think, though, that the business model of customer service, especially in a call center environment. It is known that the frontline person will be yelled at. The problem is universal. Customers and callers are given the runaround, and the frontline persons have very little power. The most frequent response is, I will escalate it to my supervisor. Increasingly, the customer never gets to speak to someone who can really do something, like a manager. I say this as someone who has been sold a cell phone product on the phone, and getting to resolve the problems arising from it is a nightmare. Story 4. I take care of people with mental disabilities. I've been pooped on, hit, cussed at, was told horrible things about my kids, spit on. I wipe, jerk, and check blood sugars. We get none of the glory that a nurse would get, and we do it for like $3 more than minimum wage. It gets you trapped because you can generally do 40-hour blocks. So being in and out in 2 days is a godsend for us with kids. Story 5. Teacher. Between the undisciplined brats, obnoxious parents, and unsupportive education departments, why anyone would choose this career is crazy. Story 6. Based on my experience, everyone, within reason, should do a 2-week stint as a substitute teacher, waitstaff, janitor, and cashier. Like jury duty, we probably all have a better appreciation for the human condition, but also a better understanding of how to not be a complete jackass. Answer. Currently a high school teacher. I had a previous BA, so I was able to substitute while working toward licensure. Honestly, I loved being a substitute. It's really all in your approach. There are those who approach like babysitting and do virtually nothing, then wonder why the kids are being obnoxious male body part. Or you can come in with some friendly energy, confidence, ready to teach. You may not believe it, but middle and high schoolers will buy in to a new, engaging teacher who is approaching a lesson differently than their normal teacher. You do need to have the skill of not being afraid to speak in public. Story 7. Teaching. No professional respect. Thousands of decisions per day. Treated like babysitters. Greg Abbott said I was just a babysitter. Story 8. Psychotherapist. People say it's easy sitting and listening and being understanding, but it's much more than that. Story 9. Any job you get paid anywhere near minimum wage. The tasks you do are individually easy, but the demands on you at that level are far beyond what you'll find at the other end of the spectrum. Crummy bosses, constant scrutiny, long hours to make up for bad pay, covering for unmotivated coworkers, making do without resources because of bad leaders, and having to maintain conformity well beyond anywhere else. That's all before you get to the emotional drain of customer-facing positions, dealing with people that just plain suck and want to treat someone as beneath them just because they are the customer. Story 10. CNC machining is incredibly difficult at times, and most people think it's just a couple buttons like a dishwasher. Answer. I did that a couple of years, though out of 15 years it's like 11, 12 years conventional. Always funny hearing old heads thinking it's just load machine, close doors, hit green button, go 1050, then go full blast. What's really hard though now is portable machining field machinist, dealing with weather, electrical shorting, bad fuses, freezing hydraulic fluid in hoses, too low RPM, not enough rigidity, torque, homemade machines, pinion gears that get stuck in the turning pin for auto feeding, brazing tools looking their best 1 second and gone from this planet the next, line, bore welds fudge up mid-bore. Being gone for a few weeks, it's like 4 jobs into one: machinist, welder, millwright, electrician. Story 11. Teacher, when I talked, the average person I spoke with seemed to genuinely think all I did was read directly from a textbook someone else wrote and then get 3 months free vacation. Story 12. Tattoo artist. It's like trying to draw with your great-grandmother's diesel-powered vibrator made in the 1950s, which makes drawing a straight line more or less impossible. But look at this. It's even more mind-boggling when you consider some of their pieces can take 100 hours to finish, and they're playing by initial success or total failure rules. I would probably have a minor anxiety attack every single day. Story 13. Local government. Members of the public have little idea as to how any of it works, but feel free to lecture about how it should be done. Story 14. People think cooking is easy and don't consider that, like any trade at a higher level, it requires 1.5 years of school and a further 2 to 3 years of apprenticeship. And even then, 10 years of work experience before you just then start to feel like you've got a handle on it. Story 15. Teaching. Well, if you want to do a good job at it anyway. There's a large difference between understanding a topic and being able to impart that understanding in a clear way, while being engaging and motivating, challenging the students without demoralizing them, and differentiating between the needs of different kids in classes that sometimes have 30 students. Source: been teaching chemistry for 10 years and still working on myself to do better at it. Story 16. Based on how half my patients behave and a zillion TikTok IG people, and a sizable chunk of Reddit sometimes. Being a family doctor. Story 17. I did around 8 years total in social services, children and developmental disabilities, and those just crush your soul. There's 2 types of people who do that work. Type 1, person who was or should have been in the system, and type 2, person who comes from a privileged background and just wants to save the kids. These 2 types of people usually cannot stand each other, and 9 times out of 10, Type 2 is the administrators who make the rules. You're also expected to get the chute beat out of you without reacting. Deal with substances, bed bugs, people who think you're trying to steal their kids. For some reason, IME, this was always in relation to court-ordered juvie teens. Like, no, I don't want your jerk teenager. I was shot at during a removal once. For fudge, 16 an hour with a bachelor's degree required. Not to mention the toll the emotional labor and secondhand trauma takes on your own mental health. Left that to go sling boxes in a warehouse. Story 18. Early childhood education. And I'd include up to first grade in that. Not only is it a ton of responsibility, but it is literally back-breaking work. Picking up a 30-pound 2-year-old to be comforted in one arm, stopping a tantrum with the other, while maintaining a somewhat organized room, providing for physical, intellectual, and emotional needs of the children, who are very dependent on you. It's sad that the profession is relegated to daycare. That's the role it plays in society a lot of the time. But the amount of brain development that happens between birth and 3 is staggering, and the profession should be given the respect that the gravity of that development deserves. Story 19. Brewing. Especially if you're in a hot climate without AC in a steamy warehouse. You're on your feet the whole day. I used to average about 10 to 15 miles of steps a day. You're lifting heavy things like malt bags, kegs, equipment around, constantly cleaning. The actual beer brewing is typically the easiest part of your day, while you multitask on everything else that needs to get done. And the pay is atrocious. Story 20. People shoot on fast food workers, but watching them take on non-stop orders for hours straight leaves me amazed. I make a lot more than they do, and I know even if they paid what I get now, I still wouldn't do that job. Not to mention the shoot people they deal with looking down on them for having a kid's job. Story 21. Nurses. Their job involves working for long hours, often without rest. They have to handle stressful situations without losing their composure. Nurses make quick and important decisions and take care of patients even when they are tired and emotionally drained. Story 22. Elementary PE teacher. Managing large groups of kids running full speed or swinging implements is a challenge to say the least. Story 23. Call center work. When I couldn't find work in my field, I tried working at a call center. That experience changed me forever. It was then that I started to wish the world would burn. I ended up with generalized anxiety disorder, debilitating panic attacks, and several months of sick leave. Please be kind to these people and to anyone working in any sort of customer-facing job. Story 24. Exotic dancers. Strippers are facing some tough times. The days of getting rained on and picking up 800 off the floor are over. Even if you are blowing 5 dudes a night, it's not going to pay for your shoes and an Uber ride. Story 25. Nursing. Get blamed for everything. Meds late due to pharmacy or shortage. Same with food and you are a glorified waitress. Short staff so you get double patients and people waiting more for things. People complaining you took too long getting new pair socks and blankets because my other patient I needed to take care first needed nausea meds because he's vomiting. But others have no regards to that. Mean doctors, managers that don't care about staff. Cleaning up nasty body fluids from private area of body is particularly horrible, especially for patients that are not appreciative and mean. Sometimes it's every hour due to how sick or meds they are on. Fun times. Answer. People don't realize how broad the role is. You are expected to perform your patient care whilst also doing extensive work in administrative systems, maintenance reporting, educating, advocating, championing a safety hazard, etc. Once you're a senior nurse, you are expected to be mostly management administrative whilst having the same workload as your peers. I've had additional responsibilities that require myself to be off the floor for 2 to 3 hours a day with a patient ratio of 1 to 8. You go from being the beloved and compassionate nurse who has the time for patients to a nurse that is vilified for being too rushed, pushy. Oh, and forget about making an error during that stress. The paperwork alone will take a half hour. Oh, did you think an error actually had to happen for it to be reported? No. We have to report near misses, close calls, for errors. On top of all of this, you are given a fairly loose education. And each year, new graduates enter the workforce with increasingly more complex patient demographics, with aging populations and more comorbidities. We have people with 30 medical conditions and 20 medications. They are walking medical textbooks. And you expect a new grad who has a vague concept of these conditions to look after that deeply complex patient for the same pay as a nurse 10 years ago? Don't get me started on the fudge e-learning. It doesn't stop. Countless hours of policy read-through, quizzes, competency assessments, debriefs, case studies, mock code blues. Oh, and the power dynamics and infighting can be overwhelming. I've been yelled at for following policies, not following policies, advocating for patients, not wanting to do something literally illegal, not wanting to accept another high-risk patient when already understaffed. Story 26. Grease monkeys. Troubleshooting out of the blue problems on machinery takes a lot more education than a 4-year degree. Story 27. Doctors or anything in healthcare. So many people ask ChatGPT or do their own research and think they know all the answers. I've shown patients in clinic how easily I can manipulate AI to give me an answer I'm looking for. Story 28. Early years care. So much paperwork and so much poo, especially since I work in a really busy place. I love it, but it takes it out of you sometimes. And it can be hard to get staff in due to the demands pay. It's a job you really need to be passionate about to do, IMO. Also, we have a large number of ASN children. Again, I love them, but it can be very challenging. Story 29. Mechanic. It's not just swapping parts. With all of the computers now, you almost need to have a computer science degree. Add electrical engineering, HVAC, and every other part or the vehicle. It's insane. Story 30. Retail and food service. People really think it's just smile and swipe until you're on hour 9. Dealing with someone yelling over expired coupons while your feet give up on life. Respect the people who stay nice through that chaos. Story 31. Sales. Permanent pressure to perform. And I think a lot of people assume salespeople are just narcissistic and nothing touches them. But a lot are very empathetic and just people who found it's the only way to make good money for them. But they get ground to the bone in order to keep at it. Story 32. Teaching. Everyone has ideas about how to make it better, or what you should do to improve scores, behavior, etc. Okay, smarty pants, come on over and try out your method. Please, I'd love to see your immediate and comprehensive success. No other job is as patronized, nor do people suppose they just inherently know how to be a banker or a real estate agent. Believe me, you don't know how to be a teacher either. Story 33. I'm a tour guide, so I'd say this. You often have to put up with stupid people who ask you the same question 100 times and can't remember your answer. Also, imagine talking non-stop for 10 to 14 hours because it's almost a sin to stay silent. They ask you about all kinds of stupid things and many other things. Story 34. Computer and network technician. Everybody is a computer whiz. Just ask them. I once had a priest tell me, sometimes I think computer people don't know what they're doing. They just try random stuff until it works. I told him it was like the mystery of faith, where you believe in something you can't see. Story 35. Programming. You thought it'd be just typing, but you need to do some research. Find bugs, rewrite something, everything depending where you're wrong. Story 36. Seafarer. Any rank, anywhere. In general, people have no clue how difficult the job of a seafarer is. Story 37. McDonald's. Worst job I had. You're treated like a robot on a production line. The best paying jobs I've had treat you with more dignity and respect. They've also been easier in my experience too. Story 38. Honestly, I think it's customer service. Dealing with people all day sounds easy until you meet people. Anyone related? Story 39. I see people saying teaching, but I want to specifically say teaching preschool. It's like regular teaching, except you also change diapers. You don't get benefits like insurance, and you get paid even less. Story 40. Property management. You meet a lot of very interesting and challenging personalities and field a heck of a lot of complaints. I once had a resident come into the office, crying, saying she heard gunshots the night before. I asked her why she didn't call the police first, and she said they told her to mind her business. I felt terrible because what could we do as a property management company? Story 41. Being a primary care physician in the U.S. is essentially a choice between spending time with your patients and getting paid. The current model does not give them time to do both. The job itself is really challenging. It spans from pediatrics to geriatrics and psychiatry, with too many algorithms to actually manage, and they are chronically blamed for the failures of the insurance-driven and government-regulated systems, which are more often than not run by huge systems with little appreciation for what it actually requires to provide care to a family. It's a hard job, it gets no respect, and the pay, frankly, isn't worth the effort or the student debt. Not even close. Story 42. Not that I thought this was an easy job, but yesterday I had my AC replaced, and that was one heck of a job. I was utterly mind-blown at all the work it took and how well the technicians did. Story 43. Web development. You can spend hours or days on the most minute detail or bug, and a product person may say, "That's it," after it's all buttoned up. Story 44. A job that goes unnoticed. 911 communications officer. Insanely intense. Extreme multitasking. Long hours. Minimal breaks. Understaffed. Being disrespected from every angle. The list can go on. Story 45. As a former partner of an architect, I would have to say it's been eye-opening. There is so much more to it than just drawing pretty buildings. Story 46. Cell phone sales. Mainly just dealing with the general public and old people making their own life harder and expecting us to fix it with the click of a button. Story 47. Running a marina. Most customers see us during downtime and don't think anything of us during the busy times. Something that has been a regular occurrence of late is customers complaining about us closing our services early on holidays. The last 3 years, I have had at least one complaint each year. This year, the complaint came direct to me. Shouldn't you guys be open later on holidays? Our employees enjoy holidays just as much as anyone else. My shop was open on the holiday. Oh, really? Where were you? Besides that, everyone thinks that their boat is the most important boat on the yard and deserves special treatment. Besides the customers, if someone came and split our business into departments, we would likely have somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 to 10 departments ran by 4 people. Add to that web design, marketing, and the second business, which is under the same roof, and you can essentially double everything. Yet people act like I'm on vacation when they see me sit down. Story 48. Being a gas station cashier. A lot of people think it's just standing there scanning items all day and being friendly with the customers. But in between customers, you're expected to stock cigarettes, wipe down the counters, keep the coffee and cream filled, sweep, mop the floor, stock the cooler, stock the shelves, check expiration dates on perishable items, empty, change out garbages, clean the restrooms, etc., etc. On top of that, corporate wants you to push rewards and surveys on every customer you interact with. Customers expect you to know things that aren't really part of the job description. The number of times I've been asked where to locate other businesses in our town just because I work at a gas station obviously makes me a human map. Or you spend all day dealing with old people who don't understand the concept of prepaying and or can't figure out how to pump their own gas, even though they've been pumping gas for longer than I've been alive. I could go on, but cashiering is more than just scan the items and keep the line moving. Story 49. Being a social worker. We don't just talk to people. We support people at the margins of society and help them carry the weight every day. The emotional toll is heavy as we do what we can, but the world sucks, and we know we can't solve all the problems. It's becoming more difficult in today's climate where there are more in need than available resources. Story 50. User interface design. When it works, it is so intuitive people don't believe it could have been another way because it is obvious. Story 51. I would say clinical psychologists. People think it's just charging $200 an hour to talk and call it a day. In reality, it is very mentally, emotionally taxing. Story 52. Mental health therapist. You'd be surprised how many people think I, M25, just talk to people for my job or just don't do as much as others. The shoot we do can be rewarding, but it ain't easy. Story 53. Modeling. People think it's just showing up to a shoot, get dolled up and look pretty in front of a camera. In reality, it's daily rejection, extremely short notice when you do get jobs, very, very long days with lots of standing around and freezing. Story 54. Dishwasher. Two people calling out, and it's a busy night. It gets interesting because all you're thinking is walking out. Story 55. Nursing. Every goofball thinks it's a great job that makes a lot of money, and then they get all surprised at how hard it is. Story 56. Truck driver. Most are paid per mile driven. Your ability to make money is capped by the federal government due to hours of service regulations. Your ability to work is capped by your respective employer by limiting your speed. Your ability to work is limited by forces completely out of your control with things like traffic and appointment times. Your job is under constant scrutiny via your employer's placement of in-cab cameras. Drivers have to deal with bad drivers, tipsy drivers, and every driver is on their phone. If one of the drivers listed above happens to crash into your vehicle, you as the professional driver are likely going to be found at fault, unless there is a witness or other inclusive evidence that the other driver acted improperly. Even if the professional driver is not found to be responsible, they will be sued by a legal industry that has evolved to make money from the trucking industry. Drivers are limited to where they can and cannot park. Truck parking availability is becoming increasingly difficult to find, and now many places charge for parking. There is a law enforcement culture that no matter what happens, the driver will be cited for some kind of violation during an inspection. Drivers have been cited for not having a full windshield washer reservoir or for not making their bed. Healthy food is almost impossible to find in any place where there is legally available parking. The list goes on and on. Most drivers start at between 0.35 and 40 cents per mile. Experienced drivers make between 0.55 to 0.75 cents per mile. Fortunate drivers make a percentage of the load hauled, or are paid by the hour. The average driver turnover in the industry is around 120. The company I work for actually had a party when their driver turnover dipped below 100 for the year. Imagine an industry where if less than all of your employees don't quit by a one margin, it's cause for celebration. Don't even get me started on the treatment of drivers by the customers that we serve. Need a bathroom after driving hours nonstop to get your product to you on time? No. Need a place to park after maxing out your hours in a customer's giant parking lot? No. It'll stop now. Story 57. Picking bananas. Did it for a week in northern Queensland, about 30 years ago. It's heavy lifting in hellish, hot, and humid conditions, with more snakes and spiders than should exist outside of your nightmares. Why so many spiders and snakes, you ask? Because the place is infested with rats to the point that every surface is wet with rat piss. Add in a supervisor who was a raging alcoholic with brain damage from Weil's disease. I've done a lot of shoot jobs down the years, but nothing has come close to banana picking. Story 58. I'm a train driver in London Overground. Our trains are manually driven, so we're not just pushing buttons. Also, I'm going to bed at 18:30 to wake up at 02:30 to book on for my early shift tomorrow. Get to depot for 04:30. Taxi to station to live and train up to do first train from end of line. Finish at around 12:30, then do same again Tuesday, only finish a bit later and start earlier. Day after start later and finish later to point I finish job at 16:30, then book on 05:45 next day. Day after start at 04:55. I no longer have a body clock, but I'm expected to be in best behavior 24/7. Story 59. Perfumer. Takes years of education, training, and practice. It is not about sloshing a few essential oils together and hoping for a winner. Story 60. Welding and fabrication looks pretty darn easy from the outside. barring the very physical work. Takes a good 5 to 6 years of formal and job experience to become competent at all the myriad skills needed. Takes even long to properly master it all. And it doesn't even pay that great unless you get your nose into very specialist areas, such as nuclear or on-site pipe welding. Story 61. I'm an automotive mechanic. The amount of people who think we have a magical computer we can hook your car up to and tell us exactly what is wrong with it is insane. Story 62. For me, any job where I'm working with the public, cashier, front desk, driver, would be too difficult. I don't have the temperament to deal with idiots, creeps, and nasty people. Story 63. Real estate. Easy to get a license, yet it takes huge marketing skills for listings and negotiating skills, plus no or little time off, and need to grow better each year. A great agent takes years to really understand all that is involved, and being the biggest purchase, most people make lots of emotions. So many clients are stuck on commission, not the results, and all agents and companies different. Interview carefully when choosing an agent. Story 64. The people who hold stop-slow signs on job sites. Looks easy enough. You just have to stand there. Turns out that just standing there all day is a psychological nightmare that dilates time in a weird twist of physics that makes a 10-hour day seem like 3 weeks. Story 65. I did gardening clear out yesterday, and I'm confused how all gardeners aren't built like Chris Hemsworth with the skin of Clint Eastwood. Story 66. Welder. It's so hard to do well, and it takes work to stay good. All-sit ages you fast due to the UV light cooking any exposed skin. Never mind the black shoot that ends up in your nose. Story 67. Customer service. I know there are plenty of jobs out there that are difficult, even life-threatening, but customer service can be a hell all in its own. Story 68. Customer service in any capacity, including like retail workers and fast food workers. People like to call it unskilled, but I think being able to put a stop on your ego and emotions and react calmly and politely to some of the stupidest people you'll ever meet is one of the most difficult skills to learn and be able to do consistently. I would love to see a construction worker or an engineer or an oil rig worker or an electrician to have to stay calm and collected while getting screamed at and threatened for something that is completely out of your control by the biggest idiot you've ever met. They would not have the emotional regulation or impulse control to not punch some of these people in the face for the shoot they say. And I'm not saying that those other jobs that I listed are easy. They aren't. But the skill set required to do them is just very different. And I think having the emotional regulation required to work in customer service is a skill that some people inherently do not possess and would not be able to do. Story 69. Most creative fields. Most people, in my experience, subconsciously don't treat it as a serious profession. Graphic design, social media management, video editing, photography, videography, etc. I could do the same thing with my iPhone. Story 70. In the kitchen for fast food, you need a good working memory because you have to remember exactly what the orders are and then delete the orders on the screen to see more of the orders when it's busy. You have to have all the burgers memorized so you can make them in a timely manner. It's hot as fudge because you are surrounded by multiple sources of heat, but you don't get any AC like the cashiers or where the customers sit. I used to go take 5-10-second breaks in the walk-in freezer to cool down. Despite doing everything perfectly, there's always some jerk that returns their order and complains to the manager. It's always the same person, and you have their face memorized. People think they can treat you like shoot because you work for minimum wage. That sometimes, but not always, includes your boss. Story 71. Maintenance tech. You don't always know what you're about to troubleshoot or fix. You have to deal with all kinds of personalities in their home. The homes can be disgusting. Filths, bad smells, bugs, cat litter, dog shoot, or rotten food. Tenants always want something else. They constantly complain to me about tenant service issues, or bylaw issues, or police issues. Tenants will have some kind of illness, flu, but won't bother rescheduling. Puff. On-call is a nightmare also. Tenants will call about every or any issues under the moon. So many times they'll call after hours. There's a crazy person running up and down the halls with a knife. Darn, call the police then. I am maintenance man, not the cops. Or it'll be like Saturday night and on-call. Tenants be like, my pipe's been leaking since Wednesday morning. Fuck, why didn't you just call during normal working hours? Ugh. Story 72. I'm a sandblaster. It's a job you rarely see footage of cause it's really dusty, so it kind of falls into a hard job you never think about. Story 73. I'm an engineer that specializes in designing high-speed cables and connectors. It's a small industry but very specialized, and the design constraints are down to physics. We have to know how electrical fields will propagate and bounce around in our designs, and use test equipment that can differentiate time events on the order of tens of picoseconds. Then worry about manufacturing and end use like human factors. How small can a person's fingers pinch, and how much torque can they make, etc. Story 74. Tattooing. It's essentially retail customer service marketing, making art on demand, every day, with no room for error. A whole trade working with the machines and actual application of a tattoo on all different skin types and ages. Everyone expects the same results and the exact image they have in mind. It's the only job I've ever had where the customer is absolutely never right. Story 75. Tech support. 1. Explaining to people who straight up don't know how to read or don't have the most bare-bones knowledge of tech is hard. 2. You aren't just dealing with Karens all the time. You are also dealing with the elderly whose kids refuse to help them. Dealing with parents who are trying to use FMIP, Find My iPhone, to try to find their kid that ran away. Dealing with a heartbroken father who has to delete the pictures of their kid that died in a wreck because they forgot the passcode to their phone. Twice in my career, I've had to deal with someone who was seriously threatening to commit tragic end. 3. On top of 1 and 2, you are also trying to maintain your stats. Most call centers have an AHT, average handle time, requirement of 10 to 12 minutes, sometimes more, sometimes less. Most call centers have a requirement that you have to maintain a 93 positive survey rate, and anything that is a 3-star or 3-star equivalent is counted as a 0, and it's weighted. So you could get 1 3-star survey, and congrats, you might need to now get possibly 24 good surveys. Keep in mind, most people do not fill out surveys. Tech support isn't easy. It's not physically demanding, but it's mentally and emotionally draining. Story 76. For many years, I was a licensed auto tech as well as HD truck tech. Constant upgrading, constant education in order to stay up with advancements and new features, etc. Then there is the heavy personal investments for tools and equipment. I'm not talking about the techs working in tire and lube shops, more so independents and dealerships. I'm sure it hasn't changed much and is still a challenging career path. Story 77. Salesman. Of any kind, especially in a call center. I'm trying to sell insurance working from home. It is fudge brutal. I really had to rethink a lot of my life choices the last 3 years. Story 78. Any kind of personal care, especially if it's for family or someone close. A lot of people assume it's cushy for various reasons, but it is often draining. It can be very hard to see loved ones struggling, and you feel like the only line between them having a decent quality of life or not. Story 79. Anything in the service industry, I'm sure as hell I couldn't do it, particularly with the entitlement and rudeness that seems to possess people these days. I would only do it if I was legally allowed to take out 1 customer per quarter. If not, then I'm out. Story 80. I don't know how others feel, but I thought content moderation online was pretty easy. After reading what Meta's moderators go through, I don't think so anymore. Story 81. Being a mechanic. You might understand how things are supposed to work theoretically, but once you snap a bolt, it's Armageddon. Story 82. Software engineering. Social media makes it look like I work in my underwear. I do, and don't have to try and make 6 figures. The reality is that software takes years of hard study and practice. I have to constantly learn and take on new jobs as my job. In the beginning of my career, I only wrote back-end code that ran on a local server. Now I'm expected to do back-end, front-end, cloud deployments, architecture, etc., all of which used to be separate jobs. I have to constantly tell idiots that make double my salary, management, that what they want is not only a poor solution, but infeasible in the given timeline. I've spent most of my career cleaning up offshore code. I'm always told that offshore developers are going to take my job. I'm paid handsomely to clean up their mess. Story 83. Tile installation. Hard on knees and back. When family finds out you know what you're doing, they think you will do for low pay or free. Story 84. I am a mechanical nuclear engineer and own a medical software company. You do not want me to paint your room or your barn. My dad fired me once when helping him paint a barn. I would pay anything to avoid doing these. That said, wallpaper is the worst. I hired a guy to do ours once, and just watching him for an hour, I had to leave the house. I could absolutely never do it for any amount of money. Story 85. Job of a meteorologist. Everyone feels like they know a lot about weather and thinks meteorologists' work is like creating horoscopes or divining from a morning cup of coffee. Meanwhile, here I am with masters in physics, working on several HPCs and doing a work of a programmer to advance something very specific in a weather prediction model using mathematical principles on physics theory. Story 86. Residential marine construction. Not only do you have to do hard, dirty, sometimes wet labor, but the things you are trying to install subsurface, pilings, planks for the face of the bulkhead, etc., can be blocked by underwater debris. If there's concrete in a very inconvenient spot, get ready for a 5-minute operation to become a 3-hour operation. Story 87. Postal mail carriers, hauling mail around all day in the heat cold while walking about 12 to 15 miles per day. Most people see mail carriers strolling around and think it's easy, but you don't see the whole route. And Saturdays aren't half days like a lot of jobs. It's the same route on Saturday as it is on a Tuesday. They're no relief, not to mention being slammed with tons of mail over the holidays. Story 88. Public librarian. Much of my work is programming, scheduling, and planning, much more than reference desk work. I don't handle social services issues in my position, but many public librarians do that as well. My daily work schedule is filled with programming, meetings, classes, scheduling, and the usual reference desk, or phone, reference as well. My only real downtime is my lunch break, and the last 2 weeks of year are slower than usual due to the holidays. There's constant pressure to develop new programming. It's a hamster wheel. And no, I don't have time to sit and read. I have my lunch break and my non-work time for that. Story 89. Flagging traffic in a construction zone. Long days. Listen to a lot of ugly comments from some rude drivers. Story 90. Childcare. People just assume it's playing with children all day, but there's so much more involved. Snack time, meal time, cleaning, long hours, constantly on the go, and never having a moment where the children are silent. Obviously, I understand that children will be hyper and excited, but it is quite a lot to handle. One day genuinely feels like 3 whole days because it goes so slow, but it is still such a rewarding job, and it's so amazing, and the children are so lovely, but it's most definitely not for impatient people. Story 91. Apparently working on tires, and I don't get it because as a tire tech, you mostly do the same 3-4 things every day all day. So with a couple months, I'm generous due to slow learners. You should be pretty proficient at everything we do. But no, everybody turns it into rocket science, and half the people I've worked with still didn't know what they were doing after 6 months. Story 92. Doing physical work outside in the middle of summer. Then no one complains anymore when you take a quick rest in the shade. Story 93. Veterinarian here. People always think my job is just cuddling puppies and kittens all day. Yeah, that's maybe 5 of it. The rest is being a physician, surgeon, radiologist, pharmacist, and therapist for the owners, usually all at once. We have specialties, but that general practice is a different beast. We see animals who can't tell us what's wrong, and we have to make big medical and emotional calls fast, sometimes while someone's crying, pissed, projecting emotions, becoming violent, or asking how much it'll cost to save their pet. It's long hours, constant stress, and a ton of heartbreak mixed with those occasional, we save them moments that make it worth it. Definitely one of those jobs that's way harder than people expect. It's not a career simply for those who love animals. It's undeniably more working with people, staff, colleagues, and owners. Story 94. Anything in hospitality, dealing with entitled guests, whilst also having to stay polite is honestly draining AF. It must be one of the only professions as well where it's basically seen as okay to just abuse the staff. Story 95. Law enforcement, people want to chair quarterback the calls they respond to, especially with shootings, but never shot a gun with a lot of adrenaline in their life. Story 96. Customer service. Hospitality field is not that easy, mainly because of customers, but not in general either. Not rocket science for sure, but not as easy as people seem to think. Some people look down on us. Story 97. Any customer-facing retail position. Sure, you only need an IQ of like 60 or something, but most of those roles you're on your feet non-stop, your entire shift minus a short lunch, and maybe 2 10-minute breaks. Cashiers at your supermarkets and Walmarts, fast food and gas station workers, bank tellers, retail phone carrier sales, your local AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile stores, door-to-door sales, internet, pest control, roofing. All of these roles suck jerk because they barely get a chance to breathe between customers, and they're on their feet all fudge day. I worked in the oil field for 15 years, starting at the bottom. I would rather go back to work in the oil fields, working on a production rig, pulling rod and tubing 60 hours a week, than work a retail job for the pay that they get. Story 98. Pharmacy. In the hospital, I have to figure out if the substances ordered is safe and appropriate from sometimes half-written notes, and then compound it, if IV, and have it delivered in a timely manner, with just myself and one tech for the whole hospital. And that's if the med ordered has no issues. If it does, I have to track down the doctor or covering doctor to fix it and hope I don't get pushback. Or if they are unsure, I have to go research the appropriate therapy for a very specific case. All for over 100 patients at once, because the queue never stops. Story 99. Veterinarian. Everyone thinks it's great working with animals, but wait until that first time you have to put one down. It's soul-crushing. Story 100. IT. We do so much behind the scenes that most users don't know about. We always have a huge backlog, and I've never known of an IT team that wasn't understaffed. I do love my job, though, and I'm treated very well. Story 101. Working in a call center. I've done a myriad of difficult jobs, and when people say, ATC, so stressful, I recall that hellish cubicle and the dumb, rage-filled Americans calling in about their lawnmowers. Story 102. Being a creative. We expect feedback and a critique, but most people, including professional people, use it as chance to tear you down for some reason. Story 103. My job as a park maintenance worker is pretty stress-free for the most part, but people getting mad at you about a societal problem like homelessness, littering, or freaking wildlife is maddening. Story 104. As much as it will anger people, being a consultant. Tried it for 3 years, nothing like the media movies. 23 nights per month, I worked until midnight, sifting through data, napped and showered in office, and continued on as if it was normal. Story 105. Teacher. So many people complain about how cushy their jobs are. Those same people would fold like a wet Kleenex if they were stuck in a room with 30 third graders. Story 106. I was a resident counselor at a home for teens with addiction and legal issues. So intense for such low pay. I did it part-time for several years and was spent when the week was over. I do look back on it as some of the most important and valuable contribution I have made to society. I think about some of the kids I really bonded with on a weekly, monthly basis, hoping they are doing well and that our paths would cross again. Story 107. Chef. As a former chef instructor, I saw a ton of parents push their recent high school graduates into culinary school, thinking it was an easy way to earn a degree. Apart from the mental and physical difficulty of this job, there's actually a good deal of math and science to it. Most of them couldn't make it past knife skills or cost control. Story 108. Hitting 2 birds, no. Make that 3 now with 1 stone. But being a male in adult content, like you need incredible stamina to keep going for hours on demand and being directed to get the right shots. Like people say that it's their dream job, but just thinking about the actual logistics of it and it probably turning incredibly mundane incredibly quick. I don't think it actually is a dream job. Story 109. Anything customer-facing and underpaid. You're not just doing the job, you're absorbing everyone else's bad day. Story 110. As an adult male performer, it's much more difficult than a lot of guys think. There's a fine line to balance between coming too soon and too late, and then ultimately not at all. It develops into a practice skill for sure. With time pressures, having maybe shot multiple scenes that weekday, the heat, the crew, the unnatural stuff that's required of you, the stopping and starting, it's a mood killer. Story 111. Graphic designer. People act like you just push a button and make things look good, but there's a lot more to it than that. There's the quality of images, color use, hierarchy, fonts, and content that makes it a bit of a juggling act. It's much harder when the client doesn't know what they want, and they just have an "I'll-know-it-when-I-see-it" attitude. But then a graphic designer could go through all kinds of trouble to make different drafts, only to have a client not approve any of them, or simply say that it wasn't what they asked for, even if they weren't clear or spoke clearly enough, but didn't say it the right way. Story 112. Retail service industry. Anything where you're dealing with the public. People are mean for no reason. Story 113. From my experience, anyone who manages people in any IT company. Some of my coworkers, holy shoot, communication lessons should be mandatory to that industry. Story 114. Veterinary technician. You are not playing with animals all day. Depending on your specialty, you are on your feet for 10 to 12 hours a day, dealing with living beings that have a good chance of causing you harm, whether it be from bite, scratch, sting, etc. You're doing nursing tasks without the benefits of nursing pay. Manhandling fractious animals whilst not having the best medical benefits. Breaking your back trying to get a radiograph on an overweight mastiff. Risking your arm trying to get an IV catheter into a bully breeds with a bite history. Fighting to give fluids to the decrepit 24-year-old cat with an attitude that should have been humanely let go 5 years ago. All for, if you're lucky, maybe 20-25 hours, but most likely the average is 15-19, and it is very state dependent. I know maybe a handful of RVTs who get even close to what a new grad RN gets. Not to mention, you foolishly take a vet job because you kept saying all your life that you dislike people and don't want to work with people, but quickly realize you're dealing with shoot people every fudge day. Because what are pets attached to? People. Maybe you get lucky working with wildlife or in a zoo where there isn't an owner attached, but their pay is generally shoot, like often 20-hour or lower. And then you're still dealing with people anyway in the form of bureaucracy. The same could be said if you work in any research lab or with a government-owned facility doing animal research. Only this time, the animals will eventually be euthanized relatively quickly, and you have no right to voice your opinion. The pay is still garbage. And lastly, with some of the highest occupational tragic end rates, the veterinary industry as a whole is hell. I still work in animal welfare, but I make near 6 figures in money and love what I do in upper management. I would rather chew my foot off than deal with a small animal clinic ever again. Maybe wildlife. Story 115. Garagemen. I worked as one for almost a whole day. That shoot is exhausting. Thought I'd be riding the back of a truck and meandering around to trash cans every here and there. I was running behind the truck most of the day. Fudge that shoot. Story 116. Receptionist, admin assistant. Angry phone calls, grouchy visitors. A lot of people like to dump their jobs on you. Then you see those same people talking strolls outside and standing around chit-chatting for 30 minutes at a time. Story 117. Government county jobs. People think they're cushy with good benefits and healthcare. The reality is, people are still cutthroat and political fighting is common. There is a huge problem with nepotism and favoritism, and your job is not always guaranteed. Someone doesn't get elected. You could get let go when the newly elected person cleans house. Story 118. I built grain bins for 2 summers in the middle of nowhere in Nebraska for $11 an hour. Definitely makes you appreciate what work is actually hard. Story 119. Neurosurgeon. Obviously being one is hard, but my friend's mom is one. She says people think it's just as hard as being any other surgeon, which obviously is hard still. But they have absolutely no idea. There's a reason they're so high paid. There's a low amount, $3,800, compared to other healthcare jobs. On average, it takes 15 years of medical school alone just to be eligible. Only a couple dozen hospitals across the U.S. offer neurosurgery departments, which even then, there are not a lot of neurosurgeons per hospital. A single mistake in brain surgery can eliminate you. Every single second matters. But adding to the list, I'd also like to say, heart surgeons. You'd be surprised how many people downplay them. Judges, lawyers, teachers, daycare employees, people who work with older adults, 60, school administrator, and CEOs. All of those seem like hard jobs, obviously, but you'd be in disbelief of how many people downplay them. Story 120. Being a poker dealer. If you work for tips, you should always be optimizing every little aspect you can. It's harder physically than you'd expect. Tons of micro movements you don't really think about. You're always min-maxing things, and on top of that scientific and mathematical part, you have to have social ability. You can just eschew all of this and be bad mid, but again, you can just always make more money if you get better. I've never had anyone try to hurt me physically, but it's not necessary a 0%er either. Story 121. Executive management. I know that answer isn't going to be popular here, but it's true. Most people on Reddit vastly oversimplify and undercomplicate the work that organizational executives do every day. You need to be a mile wide and 500 feet deep in your knowledge. Understand how to lead and develop staff. Constantly be thinking about the short and long term. Often answering to a governing board, and you're always on. Every interaction, no matter the day and time, you are actively representing the organization. Are executives generally well compensated? Yes, and some are compensated ridiculously high compared to the average staff. Are there bad executive managers? Absolutely, but those examples are outliers. Story 122. Public dentist. People think I have the best paying job, when reality I get paid $42 an hour, about half of what I get in private. I get chronic back pain, patients yelling at me for being frustrated by the public system. Every patient demanding to quicken the waiting list because I am old. I can't go out without teeth. If I tell them to go privately, if they don't want to wait, they make a story about not being able to afford dentistry. Sometimes I feel like a psychologist and this drains my day. Honestly, I love helping the community, as I do understand how expensive dental treatment is. However, I may need to separate myself from public dentistry for the sake of my mental and physical health. Story 123. Running a house and raising a family. I had to do that for 3 weeks while my wife recuperated from surgery. I'd rather pull my toenail out with pliers. I had a lot more respect for her and understood it much more when she needed time to herself. Story 124. Psychologist. I'm amazed at the number of people who think they'd be good therapists because they give good advice and joke about, "I'd have a hard time not getting caught up in all the tea my clients tell me." Meanwhile, I couldn't care less about the gossip. You are paying me a significant amount of money to help with specific goals, and I have 7 years of formal training and ongoing continuing education to make sure I help you with that. It requires thorough case conceptualization and a deep understanding of theoretical orientation in relation to your specific concerns and goals. I'm not paid to be your friend and listen to gossip. I'm providing healthcare in a field with little systemic support and glutted with bullshit pseudoscience. I'm trying my best to use all the scientific evidence I have to help you improve your life. Story 125. In the scheme of jobs, it's a dream job because the pay can be so good, but Sales is on the most mentally exhausting and draining jobs out there. Constant pressure. The job never leaves your head. You are constantly being watched while also having to deal with some of the biggest dickheads out there. Story 126. Issuing state IDs. We do not have access to other states' databases, so yes, you need to bring all the documents in, and you can check our website and make an appointment. No, we can't take a copy of your birth certificate. Would a copy of a 20 bill work either? Story 127. Drop team at a casino. I did it for 2 years, and it was not particularly difficult in itself. It's just replacing boxes in all the machines. The real challenge is doing it for 10 hours a night, nearly 2,000 a night, 4 days a week. You get exhausted really quickly. You have to remember the exact routes and stick to them exactly. And you have to fill a cart, around 300 boxes, every hour and a half. Then you have to move those carts around. And ours are made of steel, so they weigh nearly half a ton when full. Story 128. USPS mail carrier. Even in perfect weather conditions, it's still very difficult. The mental taxation is unbelievable. You're timed on everything. 10, 12, 17, you really don't know. I did this for 6 months at 19 years old in Minnesota and I quit. Never again. Story 129. Front desk check in for a family practice doctor's office. It's not just checking people in, but taking calls from a huge variety of people, like people needing vaccines, emergencies like heart pain, to mental health. You need knowledge about all of this stuff, plus office policies like deaf patient, interpretation, printing medical records. Story 130. Hairstyling. My stylist makes it look absolutely simple, but she has never once messed up my hair, and every single strand of hair is perfect. I look at her in the mirror, and she just seems to be trimming my hair, but it's far more complex than that. She is an artist, and her medium hair. I could never do what she does. Story 131. Software or computer work. You'd think it was easy with AI, but we have to constantly learn more than a doctor would need just to do jobs at 50. Answer. For sometimes I get jealous of people in law and medicine, engineering like they need to learn stuff, and I highly respect them for grinding their jerk off trying to become one. But when they became professional in their field, they don't need to stay updated as much as tech professionals, where there is something new popping up every day, and we need to keep up. Story 132. Teacher. People talk about all the holidays they get, but dealing with kids all day is very draining and can be especially difficult if you're teaching a subject that the kids aren't interested in, which is most of them. Story 133. These responses suck. Everyone is listing jobs that everyone knows are hard and no one claims are easy. The only decent answer I've seen out of the top 20 or so is adult content. Influencer. It seems easy because you're only looking at the 30-second clip, not the editing, planning, script writing, styling, and especially marketing that goes into it. Until they make it big and can hire other people to do those things, influencers have to be experts at a lot of different things and spend lots of hours seeking out and negotiating those brand deals. Influencers might still be a pretty worthless job, so it's understandable why people dislike them and will probably downvote me, but it's by no means as easy as people think it is. Answer. I would not survive 1 week being an influencer, having to come up, create, and push out relevant content daily, and then deal with all the shitstorms people throw at you when they don't like what you did, or just, the side of your eyebrows annoyed them. I don't respect them, but I could not do it, and that's one rare job I would ever even say that about. Another one is singer. Just alone memorizing all the lyrics and delivering them perfectly every time is way, way beyond my skill sets. Third one, probably security guard, because my brain would leak out of my head at the end of day 2 just from all the hours of standing and being horribly bored. Story 134. I think everyone in their life should work 2 types of jobs. Hospitality customer service to learn how to deal with people, and the other job would be a shift work factory job to see how that style of shift work and factory works and dealing with bosses and seeing how your things are made. Story 135. Barista at Starbucks. Especially recently with understaffing, new corporate demands, and store closures and layoffs. And of course, entitled customers. Story 136. Admin assistant. Yes, a lot of what we do isn't rocket science, but you still need the time and concentration to complete it accurately. Not to mention dealing with competing deadlines and disorganized teams. Be kind. Story 137. Teaching. Everyone thinks that because they've been in a classroom at some point that they know how to teach. Story 138. PR. People, especially young ones entering the profession, think it's attending glamorous parties, walking up to journalists and saying, "You must meet client name." In reality, it's fighting for coverage in a shrinking media environment where journalists are outnumbered by PRs anywhere from 3 to 6 to 1. Oh, and clients who expect 15 pieces of Tier 1 coverage, despite being just another SaaS product. Answer. This is a